Planning and Zoning work session for today, which is August 23rd, 2022. And since it's only a work session, which makes it nice, we'll be relaxing the Robert's rules and we'll be able to have a lively conversation on a few of these items, I'm sure. So Jason, could you give me a bit of an administrative update?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to create some context just for everyone, because I know this is, it's been a little while since we've discussed these things, and so first I just want to say that we really appreciate the public comments and feedback that we receive on this. It's very, very helpful, and from some of those public comments, Selena did kind of some significant changes as far as housekeeping items, spellings, terminology, continuity, and that kind of thing. And so trying to get this new format just cleaned up on that basis. And then two, I know that it has not been the case before. Just the last time that we edited this officially that was accepted by City Council was 2014. And I think it's only been done very incrementally in years past. And so we're kind of changing direction on that, and this is a document that we'll be revising and reviewing annually. And so we want to make this more of a living document because there are a lot of changes that take place every year as far as what the city does, lease items, and also I think if we're doing it that way, it kind of helps stay up with the needs of our community. And so from the 2014 version, what kind of happened is that, and this is just for the public as well, is that it was revised and Planning and Zoning reviewed it and made recommendations in 2021, but that did not go on to council. And then we reformatted it with those recommendations in it, and now we're kind of revisiting those recommendations again. And so what we'll end up doing is we'll be taking 2014 as the base, the last City Council approved as the base document, and then we'll be looking at those recommendations from that base document to City Council when you guys do in fact approve that at a regular meeting at some time in the future. So, but yeah, our goal is this year is we made a major revision, which I think is very helpful with the maps. It does have a lot of cleanup and history and maybe even some personality that's inside of it. And so, I think we'll get there, but our goal for this year is just to get this to a really solid spot. I think that we also want to be able to say, like, hey, there's this list of recommendations that may take a little bit more time, if there's some major map revisions, or sometimes we have these large parcels of land and we've got these pieces between it that we actually need to find a way to break those out. We can leave this document solid with some recommendations to take care of in the meantime until the next annual evaluation. So don't feel like you have to get everything perfect this time around. One thing that I wanted to just kind of bring about and speak explicitly about is the city philosophy on land in general. The city administration had a philosophy that we just want to keep all lands for lease only. And I think there should definitely be a lot of lands that are for sure the city will always own in perpetuity and it's only leased. But there's also a lot of lands that I think if we're looking at what it will do for our community, the philosophy's kind of changed in that there's certain lands that should be put in the hands of business or community entities just because it makes, we as a community will benefit more from that than of them owning it than us leasing it to them. Businesses and entities tend to invest way more in infrastructure when they own the land, which then helps their business or entity grow, and then there's kind of that trickle-down effect. And so we'll talk about some specific ones today, but that's kind of just a general philosophy I wanted to call out that's changed a little bit over the years. And two, from our last conversations, I did want to make a few notes on lease terms because it did come up. The city has has had a traditional standard lease of 8% of appraised value on an annual basis. These lands are reappraised every 5 years. And so the same company has done it for decades. they come in and they reappraise all city lands, and that's how that lease value is determined. And the length of the terms varies often with kind of the use and how long they've owned it, or how long they've been leasing it and what's in there, but it's really common for them to have like a base, like 20 years with like a 5-year extension optional. That kind of determines those terms. But we've also have a lot of like non-standard leases with government entities or nonprofits or community service entities. And if we look at things like the UAF Fairbanks facility, the Alaska Sea Life Center, hospital, we have a number of kind of what you'd say is non-standard leases. And these non-standard ones also tend to have a lot longer windows of lease time. And one of the things I did want to mention too is that there's like specific leases, like if you guys say, hey, we would like to see this on this lease, that we will leave that on there and then make that recommendation when that lease comes up, because obviously we can't change lease terms on them mid-lease, but we will make sure that that is noted when that lease comes up. So, and I did want to also tell you about some pretty exciting news on a couple of fronts that does involve city property. So I think fairly recently, since our last meeting, the City Council chose the Fort Raymond property for the future Public Works building site, which is a pretty big deal. This is 20 to 30 years in the making of looking at getting the Public Works building where it's currently across from the library and move that to kind of more of an industrial area. That way that property can be used for residential development. And so that size right there, if we look at 30 by 100 like city lots, if you were to parcel it all up that way, which I don't necessarily think that's going to be the way it's going to be parceled, but I think it'd be about 30. And so it is a lot. I mean, it's some serious land there, which is really great. It will also be really good for Public Works in the fact that their current facility is like 5,000 square feet. They cannot actually pull a grader fully in to the bays, and so in the wintertime they've got to work on the graders with the doors open, and so which is difficult. And so that will be, I think our equipment will last longer when they can work in a larger facility and it's heated. They'll be able to park equipment inside and let it thaw out and that kind of thing. And so that's a pretty exciting deal, but it will be going on the Fort Raymond property. If you look at Chugachmee has kind of the southern portion, and then they'll have kind of like the middle portion. So if you look at, as you're driving down the highway, the portion that they'll have is kind of about where Diamond tees in, and that goes down to that to the utility easement where the power lines go through. So it's a big square in there. I think it's like 4.5 acres.
There'll be probably, 5 acres left? I think there's...
Yeah, it's hard to see how they're like that. There's a lot more usable land than because of that power line easement. So
yeah, that sort of breaks it up.
It breaks it up. It's like a 100-foot wide, so there is quite a bit of property, and a lot of it will be unbuildable.
Yeah.
So yeah, yes, but yeah, there's a good chunk of land that will be available in that north section. That's a few acres for sure, plus.
Well, it's also set back, which makes it sort of nice that it's not just sitting right on the highway. It may have direct access to the highway at some point, but at least it's not a for lack of a better term, somebody rolling into town, you have all these trucks and stuff like this, and looking very industrial. When you're trying to invite people into town, you want to have it a little bit more, bucolic in some respects to come in and look at this small town that's inviting.
Right, and that's kind of the plan, is to make it look inviting, and they are going to look at putting a DOT access from the highway right there, so it's not going to create a lot of extra traffic.
Is that a long process?
We'll let you know.
Okay.
But we have already been in contact with, Doug has been in contact with DOT a number of times about that possibility, so it's not a new concept to them, but there are definitely like requirements, like it has to come in at a 90-degree angle and that kind of thing. So, but that's part of the plan that we're digging into now. So all that to say is that because that's all one single parcel, for next year's revision, we will make sure that will be a change that will happen for next year's as we'll reparcel that out and have it divided up and call them different things, so,
Okay.
yep. And also the city council voted to put out to the public to vote whether or not to sell the electric utility. And our municipality is one of the, it's not very common for a small municipality to own their own utility. And so that there's kind of there's some pros and cons. It's kind of a complicated thing because the city, we can't campaign necessarily one way or the other. There's certain things we can and we can't do. But one of the way that this affects this document is that we have like the power station, we have a laydown yard that's out the highway, there's power line easements, there's transformer stations like over across near SMIC. And so depending on if the voters choose to do that or not, that would obviously have a pretty drastic effect on this document, because if they did approve to sell it, then there would be a lot of city lands that would be removed from this document. But just want to make you aware of that as well.
So would all the land go with? Or portions?
I think there'd be portions of land. I'm not really sure. I guess it depends on the negotiated agreement that comes out on what, there is that, like, I don't, like, they may not want what the utility uses as the laydown yard that's just out the highway there, kind of near the Hoagland property. And so that might be one of the things in the negotiated agreement. They may be like, well, we don't really need that property. Or they may say, yes, we do want to have that property. And so it will be, I think it will depend on if the voters approve to sell it, and if that's the case, who they sell it to. We do know that there's a couple of interested utilities that are interested in purchasing. So
That's good.
Yep. So so that will get put out to the voters. Well, it could get put up. Well, it is going to come out to the voters in special election. I think it's in February, March. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I read the email, but I didn't remember.
Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of note those two big things coming out of City Council that could have a pretty drastic effect on or some bigger items on city lands, I would say. As far as the work section agenda items, I know that you and I have had some conversations about some things that need to be addressed, and there's some, I have a list of things that we came up with, and I know that there's some questions that you had that we need to address, and so I can go through my list, which does include some of those questions, and we can have discussions around those, and then
I can tick them off the list.
Yep, and then if there are items that we do not cover, or obviously if the public has items that they would like to ask questions about, which is always really good that they're here, then we can address those as well. And we expect that we'll probably have some other things to do, but at some point we'll get to a place where we can bring this back to you at a regular meeting, hopefully sooner than later, but I don't want to force anything. And then we can make revisions at that meeting as well if there were to do that one final like cleanup or anything like that. So so in regards to a specific item that was discussed, I reached out to, and this is a follow-up, reached out to Norm Regis, the harbor master, in regards to boardwalk access.
Okay.
The boardwalk access question on page 109, map 52. He told me that Ray's is building a new public access boardwalk next summer, and that the Saltwater Safari Boardwalk does in fact have public access.
It does. It just has a gate that closes, and it sort of looks like.
I think there was a sign removed.
Oh, good.
I went up there today. Signs
was
removed, but it does say no guest beyond this point.
No.
Or
Okay.
guest only beyond this point.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be after. Yeah.
Okay. I will follow up. But when I called him, I'm like, "You're the person. This is your territory, so you need to." But I did go see that there was a sign that was there that was now gone. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was gone.
And is that access on the outside or the inside? 'Cause
It's over the water.
It's both
It's on
ways.
the water.
Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure, because it should be on the outside.
Yeah, and that's why I think for all these years, especially like
Yeah.
Ray's was supposed to have that whenever they got their stuff, and it I don't think it was
And you
directly.
can go through that one past Safari. It just is like you're going by everyone's room. Like I've
Yeah.
walked through there with my dog, you know.
It used to have a sign saying
Over now.
only guests.
Only
Gotcha.
guests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only guest one was on the building, so when you come in from the restrooms there, you walk up to it, 'cause I'm like, I want to go out here and see what they're doing. Like, the sign was missing on the gate now, that was there.
Yeah.
But then I noticed one on the wall on the building that said guest only on this point. But I went back there too, and like she said, it looks like you're on everybody's back porch.
Yeah. It really shouldn't be gated, I don't think. If it's public access for everybody to walk the whole waterfront, there shouldn't be a gate at all. There's not a gate anywhere else along the whole front. And it walks across all other businesses. So it's no different. Anyway,
Yeah.
So can we request that they remove the gate?
Yeah, we can recommend that, yeah.
that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, and which does bring me to a point that I was going to bring up at the end, but that is, I think it's just a good time to do it. So on page 189, last time we discussed, it was at the very, I think it's 189, but we were discussing the items of priorities. And that was kind of like, that was that Third Avenue Park over here as a priority. So I would like to do this, with your permission, is that when we say priorities, I think of like the
I thought you said
priorities that
180.
City Council has given us.
Do you see 180?
And so what I would like to do is have both included.
189.
Okay.
So I think that I would like to have priorities that have like city, so that way they can look and see what the City Council
Yeah, that's
priorities
not
were for us for that
what I
year.
got.
And how, because that's a kind of a reflection piece and making sure we're in
I got
alignment.
nothing.
But I also would like to have a list, and I don't know if we want to call that
I know.
recommendations or proposed action items, because planning and zoning can't like do things that make people spend money necessarily, right? But I think that something like that is an action item, or something like looking at renovations for safety purposes of like Third Avenue Park.
Yeah. 'cause-
Those can be, I would like to have the priorities and look at having like recommendations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't want to be confused. And I really do like proposed action items.
Yeah.
It sounds nice.
But if you have a proposed action item, you usually have a window of accomplishment though. We'd like to be able to,
Well, I wouldn't want it to go on forever.
well, yeah, but you've seen that.
Right. Is that something that we want to kind of track from year to year? And we can follow up in the short term too, or you could have short term and long term. Because like the one we just talked about is very much a short term, like that should be like, we can take care of that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Whereas the park, like new equipment for a park, which I did talk to the new Parks and Rec director about, that would be kind of maybe a long term, maybe we can differentiate between those two.
Carol?
I really like that idea, and that was my last note, that to include a list of things to do and pursue. So as we go through the plan, just pull out those action items. And I found like the quiet title of the Resurrection River Land, Shepler Creek, Third Avenue Playground, the Shepler Creek easement up behind Dusty Lee home, like, you don't know, title's not clear. So anytime we see those items, they tend to get buried in the plan, to just pull them out, put them here, short-term, long-term, then they can be addressed.
Yeah.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah. Yep. So then I think that if we do it that way, this document then becomes kind of an effective piece where we can follow up and we can see that go, what we've done, what the cleanup it's done and the action it's taken in the
Yeah,
community.
the prioritization of action items, because otherwise you're looking at everything all at one time and trying to, whoever is in the chair at the time is gonna find a different priority. But if we as a commission have an agreement with the planning department as to what needs to be moved forward, I think it gives a clear plan of action.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. So for instance, yeah, we'll just put those under those items as we do that. And also too, obviously you can look, and you'll be kind of approving that when we bring that final document to you that to approve, to pass on to council. So, all right, so the first, and I do have these listed in chronological order, but one is on page 6, where it says, This document was revised in 1995.
Yeah. And I think it was what was the council's, what do they say? Oops, there it goes. I have a hard time with this. It's a 2021-095, I think, that they, for the council's resolution, that they approved the 2014 one, I think it was. I think it was when I found that.
So my thought, or my, I guess, a recommendation would be to write something like, the land management plan was last reviewed in September, like in this case, it'd be like September of 2022.
2014.
At that time, a major format was completed, including a map atlas and over 85 new additional maps. All city-owned lands have been individually updated on enclosed tables and maps. This document will be reviewed and updated annually, and a list of future improvements and non-urgent revision items will be maintained.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gives direction again, and it's, it shows the progression from 14 to 21 to 22, and so it sort of shows a bit of a history of the progression of the maturation of the document.
So is everyone okay with kind of me putting that as the?
I'm good.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. And then on page 11, there is a portion that we need to do, I just want to acknowledge this, we're going to look at it, but there's a right-of-way portion that is missing from the 2014 version to the current version, to the 2021 version, and so we will look into, Chair Sullivan brought that to my attention, and so I just want to, we'll look into that and clarify that when we bring that back.
And it may be a dead issue, but, and I don't know, it may be just, you have to put it in there for housekeeping, put it in there and line it through and
Yeah.
say,
Yes,
we fixed
correct.
this or did, but it was not something I was familiar with, so that's
Correct.
why it just sort of like, looked like it needed to be there.
Yep, so we'll make sure we follow up with that.
Okay.
On page 17, and I just wanted to make a note of this. As we've been reviewing this document, I called Chief Kreitz about the fire master plan recommends a new station be constructed in Midtown area to be more centrally located within the community. He said that this is not the case. And he said with the current, this could change, but Selena created maps for him to see all their calls and call volume for the last 3 years, was it? Which was a really cool map to see like the hot spots and where people are called.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
And it was great. And so he just said, actually, with the current data we have, he said that the fire station is actually best located right where it is. And so obviously as the community changes and if we develop new areas, that data could change. But he said as it now stands, it's actually in the best location it could be in from the call data.
I think they wanted to move it before because it's sort of hard to angle out of that fire hall
Yeah.
with the big trucks.
Yep.
It's not
Yeah.
particularly a great fire hall.
Yeah.
No, they need to do some things where they can get, so they don't have to backfire, they can do a pull through, which I know that's on our legislative priorities, like capital improvements plan for the city, is to be able to get funding to build a new one, and then you have to determine a site. But this one is really, really small because over the years the trucks have gotten larger and the equipment has gotten more complex. And so if you go in there, it's like you're trying to squeeze between things. And if you look at modern fire stations, you can be doing this between engines, and it's not a big deal, especially when you compare it to like Bear Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty sweet looking place.
But I did just kind of want to make a note on that piece there. Any questions on that?
No?
No.
Okay.
Good.
Page 24, map 7. And I'm looking at this one because we did get a comment from a citizen on this property.
Right.
That was Sharon Ganser from He Will Provide Food Pantry, and she did want to know if there might be space in that facility for He Will Provide at some point in time. I don't know. I know the senior center's got 3 levels to it. So the senior center has upstairs, TYC has the next 2 levels. And she was just asking about the use of that and if there would be space, because they're currently in the basement of the annex building right there, but we know that that is on the list to sell. City council has put that on the list to sell within the next couple of years, and so they need to find a new home. So I wanted just to acknowledge that public comment and kind of describe the situation to you guys.
Would that be something that we would concur with? I mean, because it would still be a city, lease or something to that effect. Would the city agree with that first, or would we have to approve to something that first? Would that be something we would do first, or the city do first if it came to that?
You mean as far as like leasing to them, or as far as?
Yeah, creating a lease of some sort?
Yeah, I think that first it'd have to be determined, like, is TYC and under their current agreement, like, using the full facility? Is there space available there? Or are there any other available city properties that could provide for that? No pun intended. But because they do serve a very important function in our community, and I know that she said they need, I think it's, I don't know how many 100 square feet that they need, because they also have like freezer space, and they need to have like, the thing that's difficult, I mean, they need to have like round access, because carrying all that food up and down stairs for storage is really difficult.
I think it's 1,200, at least 1,200
Yeah,
square feet.
I think that sounds about right. So,
Is that something that, I think you were trying to touch on, that would come to us, or is that a city council needs to figure that issue out?
I think that you can make recommendations, like I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it'd be fair enough to make a recommendation to say, hey, like, let's look at that, like, building is it being used efficiently? Is it being used fully? Obviously, whatever TYC is there, they have a lease agreement that is there for so long. But I think you can make a recommendation to take a look at that piece of city property and its use, and whether or not there's the opportunity there.
Right.
So.
Carol?
Just have a suggestion on that, since we're going to be reviewing this annually, and the annex is nowhere near to be sold. It seems like they could start the process by developing a list of what their needs are, how much square space, how much freezer space, they need ground entry, let them make the proposal, what they need, and then go to council, and then they could say, we need to support them or we don't, and then we could see where we are in this plan revision for that year. It seems a little premature right now. There's so many unanswered questions.
Right, and they do have a few years in there right now, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that so they're okay for right now. I do know that she wants to find kind of a, like no one likes being like a transient business or a transient entity where you're having to move stuff all the time, and I know that we have to, moving freezers regularly is not
They've
fun.
moved a couple of times
Yes.
already that I know of.
Yes, they have.
Yeah, I agree, it would be nice to find a more permanent place for them, but I also agree with Carol, it's not pressing at the moment, and it does, to me, seem like they need to go to council, and then council needs to kick it to us.
The needs statement's really important, because you can't make a good decision without a needs statement, so to speak. It's a good idea.
All right, well, I will, I'll follow up on that. All right, so the next item is on page 26, map 8. And this is the hospital. And this is one of those pieces of properties that I think has a complex history. But I know that early on there were some agreements between the city and the hospital and making sure they stayed here, and some funding and some taxing and
We have bonds and
all kinds of stuff.
Involved with
And so it made sense at one point in time, I think, with not only the hospital, with also Seward Mountain Haven, for us to be, they had to check in with us. I think they have to still send us financial statements. There's a lot of things that are going on, but now that they are like up and running successfully, and we don't think there's the need there, and there has been talk or interest, I think, in Providence in purchasing their facilities. Like I said, businesses will usually invest more and better if they own their property. And so both, there's nothing official going on right now, but I know that there has been discussions on multiple levels of there probably needs to be discussions soon on the Providence property and the Seward Mountain Haven property to do that. So anyway, the way that we are looking at this, I know like at one point in time, something like this would be like, hey, we're just going to keep this property because we have to, because there's these bonds and agreements. But that's no longer the case for some of these properties, and they can actually thrive more if they own the property. Usually grant funding a lot of times is tied to whether they own the property or not. And the city's actually had to kind of like sign off on some other people's leasees grants at times. And there's been questions of like, is the city liable if they default? And so, anyway, I just wanted to talk about this one specifically, and I think Seward Mountain Haven was also on my list, but that we will be looking at, instead of saying keep in perpetuity or, it says retain ownership, but I think that the recommendation is now like we're going to take these things and with the right deal, we would sell that to Providence of what makes sense for both the city and the entity, as long as it ensures that we can retain long-term. I think the important thing is that we want to do whatever it takes to retain the best long-term health care for our community as possible.
I think they're ahead of the bond payments, from my understanding.
Yeah.
And they're doing pretty well in that respect. And I think it's due to the high census in Mountain Haven, and that's allowing them to, pay the bills and, have a little bit of additional funding for what they need to do there, and plus paying the bonds to us. And yeah, I was going to say that, the old plan was retain it, and I think it makes good sense to recommend for it to be sold.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for keeping majority of the lands except for residential use, for selling for homes, but there are a few unique lots, say the hospital, the spot behind it, and the Sea Life Center, where the city, I don't think, has any business owning that land. And for other businesses, if something happened, the city would be able to take care of it, but these extra special unique areas, if something did happen, the city wouldn't be able to take care of them. So I think they should be on their own.
Carol?
Would that be a good reason to have a special section for those special properties? Because right now they're just kind of scattered throughout the document, but you mentioned it in your introduction. There's these special properties. It just seems like maybe that would spotlight it to manage them differently than other lands. Just a thought.
Yeah, ultimately that's something that you would get to decide, but I do think there are so few of those properties. It's not like there's a list of like 20 of them.
It's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, and I think that the CRRC property and what's that?
In the Sea Life Center, the UAF property.
Yeah, the Chugach, the Lutic Ride Marine Institute.
Yeah.
That's also another property where like we've had to sign off on their grants pieces and that kind of thing, and they're also thriving like. And they're getting grants for expansion and that kind of thing, and they are doing amazing. If you guys don't, go talk to Jeff sometime and get a tour and hear about all the things that they are doing down there. It is, and what they're building up to, it's pretty amazing. And so I think I'd say I can think of maybe about 5 places in town where it might make sense to have those conversations about. They would be better off, and our community would be better if they own their land and they'd be able to invest more and thrive that way. So.
Well, it's less hassle for the city itself. I mean, your administration's just so big,
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on creating a special section? And we wouldn't do it for this time around, and maybe do like put that on the revisions list, that we will bring that before you for next year. Is that something that you guys would be helpful for?
I'm good with that, because the dust is settled, because you've already reorganized it once from the one that was in 2021. And by moving the maps to match the narratives, which is good. I think maybe if we just slide it around for the the next go, get this settled as best as we can, get a green light, I guess, if we can, from the city or from the council, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Anybody else thoughts?
don't know, I like them organized, like by area, honestly,
Okay.
just because when we do read it all the way through, you see those special places, you
Okay.
know, and there are so few of them, so.
And if
I
they
don't
do
know,
sell, they won't get
personally.
off.
Right, exactly. It's like, they shouldn't be there forever, right?
Right, yes.
So, that's my personal.
Carol?
One other thought on that is, as we go through this plan, just as we do have in the back, these future recommendations, is to include any revisions that we'd like to see in the
Yep.
future, so we don't
Yes.
lose track of those.
Yep. Yeah, we're already kind of keeping track of those, but yeah, I do think we need to just maintain this document well by knowing what we still need to do on it. There's still a lot of heavy lifting on editing. And I want to mention just right now is one of the things that we're doing is since Selena did this major revision, we have new imagery available. So more modern, updated, and so Selena's in the process of already like, it won't be for this document, but it's like, they'll be doing like map revision. She'll be bringing like all new imagery that's more like up to date. So obviously like if a house next door to somebody was now no longer there, it'll, you know, type of thing. And so, but it will be the most updated imagery. What was the, what imagery is this year?
It's gonna be 2020, so like your SMIC breakwater,
Right.
that's on there.
Nice
so-
to have that.
Yeah.
So it's visible.
And then which was the one that we're currently working off of?
It, a conglomerate of 2012, 2015, anything that could complete the full picture.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so it'll be nice to have more modern and up-to-date imagery as well.
So are we putting those into a spot or leaving them?
I think we're leaving them for now, and then.
We're leaving them for now, and then we'll probably take a quick look at the recommendations before we move into the recommendations for the next work session, just to be like, yeah, we're still on page with that, and then we'll go ahead and make those and bring those forward.
There's
So,
been so many changes from 14 to 21 to
Yeah.
22, I
Yeah.
think it's just a little bit,
Yep,
it's like
Yeah.
folding jello.
I'm with the I'm with the
okay, the next item is page 28, map 9. Which is the Parks and Rec warehouse. So this property right here, Chugashmi has, so basically what you can see in the map right there, and maybe, and a little bit more as that line continues out down the highway, and a little bit more to the north, that's the parcel that Chugashmi has purchased for their health clinic, which I believe they're gonna be starting construction on it next summer. It is their regional health clinic, and geographically, we actually sit in the middle of their service area. Over that direction, we have Port Graham, Nanwalek, and Seldovia, and then over here we have Tutitlik and Chiniga, which are villages over there, and so that's kind of like their service, their major service area. So we actually geographically sit in the middle. And so we are going to be kind of their regional health clinic, and so they will be either like transporting people here, like flying. I think we'll probably get some more wheels on the ground. And so that will be placed there, and they, I think they're going to have like 24 staff. So that would be kind of big, more housing.
I hope they build housing.
Yeah, we won't get into the housing part then, but I just did want to let you know what that parcel is, and then the new Public Works is just to the north of that. So, but the current warehouse property, that was built, I think at the end of World War II originally. I know it's burned once or twice maybe, parts of it have, and then it's been kind of reconstructed. And in the current, I think the current one is that, is to look at selling this, but the more I've kind of looked at this, and the more I've gotten involved with the cemeteries, and we were out there last week looking at a lot of housekeeping items for the cemeteries and putting in foundations for columbaria. If we were to get rid of, like, sell that parcel, it would cause other problems long term, because Mike showed me the property line to the Legion Cemetery, and I was like, oh.
We're halfway in the Parks and Rec parking lot.
Right, and so, but it's one of those things where it would cause issues with parking, and whenever we do have stuff going on at the cemetery, there's parking on the road, And even just regular visitors and maintenance, we would lose that parking. And if we were to sell that too, I think that there would probably be the justification that Parks and Rec could use a maintenance shed that's on site, so they're not having to bring stuff there all the time. But I do think that, let's say that Chugachmi did want to buy a portion of that property, which I think there's been some informal talk of that, but I think that we should keep at least kind of a portion of that property for parking. There's lots of different ways to do that, but I do think we need to not sell that entire parcel. And I really think the only people that might be interested in buying that would be, a portion of that to expand the property would be Chugachmi. And we were out there looking at it, and actually if you divided the parcel from kind of like the high left to the low right, and that kind of half that way and half down that way, it would kind of provide a nice traffic and parking area in that direction. But anyway, I do think that we need to recommend, I would like you guys to recommend keeping at least half of that for cemetery parking.
We desperately need it because everybody's parking all over the place, and it's, running over graves in some places.
Yep.
So I think it would be good if we could, can you recommend retention status is, retain, half or retain a quarter, or,
I would say retain at least half.
I think we should retain all of it for now, especially if you want to put a building on it for maintenance. And if if the Legion lot was already halfway into the driveway, and you talk about cutting it in half diagonally, there's, I don't know, I guess there's enough parking there, but I like parking, so. That road into the cemetery is not great for parking, so it would be nice to have people park outside of it and walk into the cemetery.
Yeah, technically that's not even a road. Aspen Lane ends at the, right there. It's supposed to, it's just an easeway, I think.
Yeah. It's barely big enough for
a hearse.
a car. Yeah. So, I don't know, I'd like to just see retain all of it for now, but at least keep half of it for parking. You're right.
And just as a side note, we do have a cemetery, is it called the Cemetery Comprehensive Plan?
Cemetery master plan.
Master Plan. That has not been updated since like 96 or 99? 96. So as part of that cemetery master plan, after going out there, we need to revise that because it's, 26 years old. And then, but part of that, I want to make sure that we do create an adequate parking plan for our cemetery, and some other items as well. But that's a task that we're going to be picking up here shortly, and kind of this fall. And so we'll probably be bringing that before you as well at some point in time, just to get your. I don't think it needs to be technically, but we want to make sure it is your stamp of approval on having input on the cemetery plan. So, but I do think that will tie in with that about needed having parking there. So
Might be a win-win for everybody there if the city retains it and they can put their storage building, and then we can work around the parking stuff throughout there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we want to go with retain parcel at least half for parking at this for right now recommendation.
Sure. So at least we know which direction we're going.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely keep it for parking. I want to keep it all, but I'd be okay with it.
That'd be big for parking. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with a building.
I agree with keeping it all too.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
building
And it
will
just
get
makes
torn down.
sense.
No, a maintenance building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a maintenance shed. Yeah, not the building, of course. Yeah, that building's gonna be gone.
Yeah, it's been mostly, we don't have people inhabiting that building anymore. It was condemned
I know.
a long time ago. And so, but yeah, that's, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so
Mountain Haven, I think.
the next one is actually, page 30, map 10, Mountain Haven. And anyway, that's kind of goes along with the Providence, that Providence piece of where it makes sense to sell.
Yeah, I agree. It's another one of those special, the unique lots.
Wonder how long that would take to I'd get that moved along a little bit. I mean, I guess it all depends upon what financial, who's owed about what, and when the bonds are paid off and everything's done.
Yeah, I mean, once that, but I know that they've had discussions on where those things would meet up so that they could sell that property. Like they have the timelines down and all that kind of thing, or like even like if you pay off a bond early, there's a little bit of penalty, but the money going into that could pay for the penalty. And anyway, I know there's just had some informal like conversations about those items. Page 79, Forest Acres Campground. I don't know if we've discussed this one before or not, but that's being sarcastic. But right now, when I say the Forest Acres Campground parcel, it actually includes the bike park. Because that is all one continuous parcel. And so we do need to subdivide that from the bike park, from the campground, onto different parcels. And so, in that way, yeah, they just need to be divided. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Subdivide that, and I'd also like to just see that the campground also kept on as potentially sell.
Yeah, that's been on the long-term plan as far as sell for sound development plan.
Make sure it stays.
And then the bike park, we need to rezone as park.
Yeah.
And maintain the park, that's the stuff that's on all those areas right parallel to Diamond. That's all park area too.
Yes.
That stage remains park.
Yep. And that park there, I would say that might go on a recommendation list for upgrading the playground equipment on as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Carol?
I know this is still in process, but as you probably know, think we really need to retain that campground as a campground. And so I'm opposed to selling the campground portion.
Okay.
So what we'll probably do is we'll probably look in the next, because some of the preliminary work we did when we were looking at that development earlier, we have done the groundwork to subdivide that, so that might be something that we'll probably bring back around to you and subdivide that to break those parcels apart.
Yeah, I would think so, because the bike park's one thing, and then you have the campground, the other
That's
thing,
another.
so it cleans it up a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so page 81. Okay, page 80, sorry.
80?
Yeah, it's actually page 81 that I want to address, but it is, the map's on page 80. And I just want to, this site will be developed as a Jesse Lee Home Memorial Park in accordance with the state grant. It will include interpretive signs, benches, picnic tables, playground, potentially a community garden, and dog park. So I just want to, I do think that we need to, it's currently platted as 2 parcels, and we need to replat that as a single parcel. And then, so that'll be like a replat. And then we were hoping to have that like taken care of this summer, but the cleanup process has just taken longer than we thought. Because anytime you do one thing through and they find a little bit more, then you have to do all this other work. Well, you have to actually send your plan for what you think is there to ADEC, and they've got to approve your plan for going and looking at that stuff, and then they've got to pull that out. You have to weigh it. I mean, they've got to do all these tests. They've got to send it down to them and let them know what they found exactly. And it is so anyway, that process of doing that, they took out the major, but they found round 2. And so they're in the process. But our hope is still that maybe by the end of this summer season, it might be very late, but that we could, Metco's actually already been paid from the original grant out, because it had to be spent, to fill that in and level it. So once we get that mitigated, and they can fill and level, then then they'll start digging into the plans. But they can't actually move forward on the actual plans until they know exactly that they can fully mitigate it, so they know what it can be used for. Because there's certain things, if they found things in the soil, you'd have to put like a protective, like permanent covering in there, and then you can only use it for certain things up on top. And so it's kind of a complex beast. And so, and that grant that was used to do all that cleanup was is over $1 million. It's already been spent, and so now the city is kind of spending their own money for that cleanup and for some of the mitigation efforts. But just wanted to give you guys kind of an update on where that's at, and that we do need to plat it as a separate parcel. And once it's all cleaned up, and we get to go ahead, that we can fill it in, then the kind of more hard plans can be made. But those are kind of the tentative plans that were there.
I know that for the actual Jesse Lee, the memorial part over there, that there was a grant specifically associated with things, and Courtney may remember about that from before, that there was specific things that were associated with that grant. I just want to make sure everybody looks to make sure the things that were agreed upon for that are considered and not just looked at as potential. We might put that in there later, because I'd hate for us not to receive the funds and then not do what the grant had said.
Yeah, and we've had attorneys review that just to make sure that we are working within the bounds and keeping that money where it needs to stay for public. It's supposed to be there's definite language around public benefit and use and certain things like that, so.
Carol?
Just a thought, here's another item that could go on the action section in the back, and that would be to include all the replats, so that we have a nice tidy list of all of our replat recommendations.
Oh, a listing of replats? Yeah.
So this could go on there, and also maybe this could go on a list for an action item to add this to our legislative priorities, because we need more money to clean it up. And it's been, as Jason explained, much more complex than we initially thought. We've already burned through $1 million. So maybe an action item would be to consider it to council for legislative priority, or for our markets.
Given all that, is there, we'd like to have a recommendation just to, are you good with changing the language that we replat that as its own separate parcel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we'll look into, when we get this next estimate, for the next section of cleanup, we'll probably address see what we need to do and how much it's going to cost. So.
But a lot of times those grants are annual grants. You got that grant a while ago. Maybe you could go back in for another bite at the apple.
Yeah.
More cleanup.
More cleanup.
More cleanup money.
Yeah.
Oh man. I'll be glad when that one's put
Besides the
to bed.
military's fault from when they had their barracks there.
Stop blaming the military.
Yeah, it was what they found, the structures underneath
The
the Jesse Lee structure, that there were structures they didn't know about were underneath. That was the problem.
Oops.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. So, the next one is page 101. So the recommendation here are to consolidate with the other city, right? Yeah, you can call it that too, right? The other city shop and sell, and so I want to change that recommendation, because that's actually Doug came and talked to me about this, and he said this doesn't really have anything to do with Public Works. This is the utility department's property. This is like their laydown yard where they store things, and so this is, I would say recommendations are to consolidate with the utility properties. because it is utility laydown yard.
Yeah, I think that might be a wise idea to just kind of maybe leave all utility stuff alone until we get that vote back and see what's
Yep.
gonna happen.
Yep, I just want to make sure that's not associated with the city shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all get lumped together a lot of times too.
Right, yeah. But I would just like, instead of changing the language, recommendations are to consolidate with other utility properties. You don't even have to put in sell, you can just put recommendations to consolidate with other city properties. And I think for now, like, retain status, because if we look at retaining this, like, our job is not to say we need to sell this, but if it's retained with the utility, then that means it will be considered with the utility, which it should.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we'll change those recommendations to retain with the utility?
Yes.
Okay.
And while we're on that topic, Doug, I think, wanted to use, instead of city shop, we're going to use public works facility. Is that okay? I think it's okay with that.
Oh, for using that language?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so
because city shop can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's a little informal, I guess.
Ambiguous.
What page are we on? Again?
Hmm?
What page are we on here?
101 right now.
Okay, we've got a couple more here. Page 158, which is the Iron Mountain shooting range. I believe.
It's actually 2 pages after
Is it?
But
You
not
know.
by page number.
that. If you go by page number, it's a 161.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah, it's the,
Well,
I know, isn't that confusing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
it's close.
It's close.
Or in the bookmark.
So the Iron Mountain shooting range, there was discussion about this before. And so, and I was talking with Chair Sullivan earlier, but we want to require additional requirements. Additional access, better road maintenance. I just wanted to get some clarity on what the conversation was this last time and what you guys wanted to recommend for that, because I don't feel like that's a little ambiguous.
Yeah. I'd like to see the brush cut down. It's so thick in there, you can't hardly see anything. And when people are shooting, I would like to have a lot of visibility.
Because a lot of people don't even know that there's a shooting range there, and they hear these gunfire, they just like, you know, have an issue.
It should be clean and clear and open.
I think there should also be, additional posting requirements of when the hours are open, who to specifically access and who you can contact, because it's almost like a private shooting range, even though it's a public range. And there needs to be some sort of, an understanding of their, whether it's their bylaws or who can go, what you need to do to prepare yourself to go. Because I've known a lot of people that try to get there and try to speak to some of the individuals and they can't. So there needs to be a reliable source that we can get good access to it. Otherwise, it needs to be looked at a little differently.
Yeah, it's very vague. A nice sign out front, big sign that says, I don't know what you want to say, but city shooting range, rules, contact, a nice gate, so it doesn't just look like this secret place in the bushes.
Which it is.
We lease for $1.
Yeah, it very much is.
Yeah, they raise for $1, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have one question about that is, I know a lot of times firing ranges have, who cleans that up with the brass and the ammo and everything else that's there? Who does that?
You're supposed to clean up your own,
Right.
but I know that that's not always the case because I've gone out there and I've cleaned up other people's stuff. And I know that there's a couple of really, I don't know who they are, but I know that they've been mentioned, that they just kind of go out there regularly and I don't know if they're retired, but they just kind of go out there regularly and clean it up for everyone and kind of maintain it. So it's kind of like a volunteer. So there's some volunteers I know that go out and do that. I do think that definitely some improvements could be made out there.
At least better communication so people know what to do.
Yeah. And I know that I've heard of people desiring to not just have a shooting range, but there's that first section as you go in before you can see on the map, you can see kind of the lanes where they're bermed up, where the actual like firing range pieces are. But I know, and I think there's some clay pigeon pieces there to the south where that line kind of goes through it to shoot like shotgun. But there's also like a large section of land there that is treed that I've heard people like, it would be really great if that was cleared out and it could be used for like a 3D archery range. And so other types of shooting sports
Yeah,
could be given room to shoot there as well.
so that would be nice.
Okay. All right, the next one is, I don't know what map it is, but I just, only because I got a call like right before I came down here, and it was from former council member Cheryl Cease.
Yep, I got some.
And she talked about the parking, the Jeep Trail parking area. And she wanted to communicate to me that cars parking in front of that area is a huge safety issue. Because that is actually an access for, that's emergency access. They do open the gate, they do take vehicles up there. And so she just said she wanted me, as we're talking about do you know what page that's on?
Page 86, map, maybe
41?
or map 41.
Page 86, you said?
Yeah, but it's not the,
Oh, right. Right.
So 88.
88, yeah. Yeah, so she said that the recommendations are to clear and develop a small trailhead parking to serve the trail. She said the only problem is that I think there's not enough room between the houses and the gate that sits there to actually develop parking.
I know her oil tank is like right there.
Yeah, you can you almost walk through her yard, right?
Yeah.
But she said that because of that gate, she said that gate is an emergency access entrance that the fire department does. I know they use actually to get up there for the Mount Marathon, but also too if there were other emergencies like a fire, or if someone were to be injured up there on a regular basis, they actually do use that road as an access. So
Maybe delete that for parking and just leave it as clear it for, just emergency access vehicles. Because people can park on First Avenue and, it's not that that's a ton of parking there, but.
It's not ideal, but there's really no other solution there.
yeah,
Well, it's true, but if you park somewhere, if you're gonna go hiking, you park down the road a little bit.
Yeah, so you
yeah.
you park,
You can tell
we have to
the
park on the
clusters
road,
around
we don't have
there.
any space to create parking, especially if we're gonna leave that for emergency access, so. I guess we could just clean it up and park on the street.
Cheryl's driveway.
Yeah.
And she said that she didn't mind, as long as she doesn't block her car.
Yeah.
Right.
Carol?
It seems there's correction needed here. I think the zoning right now is R1, so that zoning should be changed to R1 and then recommendation to resort to parking space.
Okay.
Yeah,
Check
if that's
those
the
out.
case, that he needs to have it.
Well, that protects it then.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's a couple of other items that we wanted to talk about as far as looking at things we need to do for the future or just kind of be thinking about. One of them is like the Whale's Tail Park. You guys know where that is?
Yeah, it's on Port Avenue and 4th?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that little sliver on the backside of Napa,
Yeah.
and that's actually a park. It's
Yeah.
actually, I don't believe it, I believe it's not a parcel though. And it doesn't have an address, and it doesn't, it's not actually a designated park space. And so,
That's page 83.
thank you. And so there's things that we look at like that, as far as and there's a number of these, so I'm not going to talk comprehensively through them tonight, but there are a list of items like that that are kind of like long, I would say, cleanup that we need to take on, of establishing a parcel or establishing that as a park. Another one was, I appreciate Ms. Griswold's comments that kind of brings a lot of these things to our attention, but if you look at the Woodlawn Cemetery, which is the cemetery that's outside of city limits, out of Salmon Creek, the city owns a fairly big parcel out there, and only the northern half is the cemetery. And so it's like we have this other half that you consider that, like, it could be considered like a surplus land, but then too, it's like, do we want to keep that for future cemetery expansion? Or, so we have these city lands that we probably need to take a closer look at down the road. So anyway, that was just two examples of a number that we probably, once we get this revision up, but we may start tackling some of these issues on a year-by-year basis. Or even like, let's say we don't have a huge agenda for a city, for like a meeting or a work session, maybe we can tackle a couple of these items throughout the year on what we might want to do with some of these pieces, but.
Probably have to have a separate category if we put it on the radar, sort of up in your office the way you have that, so when you have some dead time somewhere, you can throw that in there or something.
Yeah, right. But I kind of feel like those things like that, we should be putting on those like future revisions or future issues to address, or like some kind of like long-term game priority items to specifically address. Any thoughts on that kind of?
Yeah, it
I
makes
think it'd be
sense.
perfect, because if it doesn't, it will fall off your radar.
Yep, and then someone 20 years from now will be going like, why didn't they address that back then?
Oh, Carol?
Well, while we're on the Harbor Parks section, and I'm on page 82 and 83, I mentioned it before, but we have a triangle park that would fall in that same category as part of the right-of-way, but it has a sidewalk through it, has two interpretive signs, and it's just,
It's by the, Jason, the Lear property, right?
yeah, it's just right here, Triangle Park. And it's called Triangle Park, it was in the original Parks Direct Master Plan.
Really?
So, yeah, so we need to research that. The city maintains it as a park, and it should be part of this cleanup.
And where's that again, Carol?
It's right here, I'm on page 82 in the printed packet.
It's off of Phoenix and like the Lear property. It's kind of pinched in by the highway, Phoenix and Steve Lear's property.
It's between the Artesian Spring and the Seward Highway, and it connects people walking along the highway from Alice Street down to Gary Hill Lane.
The KFT bunkhouse people walk along through there often.
Real popular sidewalk, it's really pretty.
And what needs to be done with that? Just made it into a park?
Yeah, I don't even, it's not like a parcel or piece of, I think it just kind of.
Just relabel it what it's doing.
And the fact that it did used to exist as on a former plan is kind of interesting that we.
Is the Welltail Park in the easement or right of way for the road to where we couldn't really plat something in there? Because it looks like the property lines are moved off the road just enough to the easement there. And then the Welltail Park just kind of appears in the roadway or in that easement area. So maybe it's not really able to be put into a property. And that's why they haven't done it yet.
Yeah, we'll have to, it's been, we'll have to.
It's kind of like it's just part of the sidewalk more or less. But
Yeah.
it is a park.
Benches and stuff there.
Yeah.
And is a pocket park an official term? I see pocket park, recommendation to maintain as, that's Whale's Tail now, getting back on yours, is to maintain as a pocket park in a rest area. And I don't know if that's an official term.
It's probably
around
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Someone made it up.
it's a
It
little
worked.
park.
And I think the Urbach one right here too is also considered.
Pocket park, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
If
Yep.
it's not,
We should, we'll just,
adopt it or
we'll come up.
make something like it, because we have a couple of really small parks that I wouldn't really consider a park. They're just kind of a nook.
Yeah, if somebody's walking and needs to take a break, that works real well.
look that up and see if we can find a definition or not, make our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if not, we're gonna patent
Patent that
the,
parking part.
Patent the name.
patent the name.
Yeah.
My notes here. And so just, that's all the specific items that I have on my list to cover if you guys have any more, but I did want to talk about our planned adjustments for next time will be our imagery update, going from the 2012 and 15 and getting all that up to 2020. We will update all the leases that are expired this year and or next year, and making sure that, because Norm Regis is the one who handles most of the city's leases, because most of them are harbor. And so make sure that if there's any recommendations that he gets them prior to renewing that lease. And then too, like if we, as city lands sell, we'll have like map adjustments as a check, make sure we're making map adjustments. And then in 20, I think the last is 2020, I think it's on a 5-year, like 2020, 2025, you know, that we'll have another reappraisal that will make sure we go back and adjust all that kind of thing there.
Will they ever get the leases in, you know, other than the in perpetuity leases like the Sea Life Center and some of these other ones? The other ones, you know, some are like 30-year leases and other ones are just 5-year leases. I mean, how do they determine that? Just the old boy system back in the day, or?
I think whatever sounded good at the time or whatever they were willing to do. And so if you look at the leases, some of them are really long and some of them have like no extensions, some of them have like multiple extensions.
Yeah, just sort of wondering if, because does the harbor department do that, or do we determine those and they manage it?
I think I honestly don't know if you have to look in code, but I think what's traditionally happened is that whoever handles the leases, I think, is kind of determined. I mean, obviously those have to go before city council as well. But I'm not really sure how those terms were originally defined.
Will they move forward to try to standardize them as leases, others expire and new ones crop up? I mean, it just seems sort of, because I would think for a lease, and this is just, you know, me talking out loud here, you know, because you get a lease for X amount of dollars, do they stay at that rate or for the length of the lease? If that's the case, that could be, you know, $1 a year, and you know the city's losing on some valuable income potentially. But if it's like a 5-year renewable, that might be reference to that organization you said that values the land or every 5 years, or that.
Yeah, we get reappraised every 5 years, and that's what those leases are based on.
Yeah, so.
Except that we do have leases that I think we do have a couple of leases that are very minimal, because they are like with government entities or like UAF.
And that makes sense, yeah, those do. But,
But the values go up every 5 years based on the appraisal. This land's not going down at all, I don't think so.
Not here. Not here for sure. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, that's, I think,
What you have?
that's a majority of the items that I have, at least.
Thank you. You got the ones that, a lot of them that I paid last time. I was checking them off on the list when I was working on it. Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm happy to discuss any other ones. Are we reviewing any other ones?
I have a couple
Sure.
questions. Page 84, which is the map, and 85 is the actual write-up on it. But it's that Holm Lane lot that says it's slated, well, not slated, but is added on here to be turn area into a parking lot for 2 lakes. And I'd like to see that put up for sale or have it on for sold, because you'd have to cross the road, and there's already a road and parking on the west side that could be improved where people park now, and that's where the walkway is down to the lake where the city has their shack for all their ice grooming equipment. So I don't know, to me it doesn't make sense to have the parking over there where there's not proper access to the lake and you cross the road, when there's already a spot that's people do park in, but it would be nice to update it and actually make it a proper parking area.
Yeah, It's a weird one because we went up and looked at it, we had to go up and look at it a couple times, but there's actually a right of, like, there's someone's driveway that goes through our property. And I don't know if that's an established right of way.
Can we find out if it is
Mhm.
and sell it to them?
Isn't there a big rock in the middle of that road too?
Yeah, I
I don't know, it's like, we went up and, we looked at the maps and went up there and like walked the property and then we looked at it again, we're like, what in the?
But if it's,
So it may be something that we actually need to have like surveyed out and like to find out what we can actually,
because if they
deal
have
with
a
it.
proper right of way, I mean, I guess we could put a parking lot and go through it, but it still doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's, I don't know, to me, there's already established parking lot with a proper trail down to the lake on the other side. It just needs to be, flattened and actually made nice. And then 97, page 97 is actually I'm not going to go there, but I want to make sure that for the Spring Creek, hold on just a second. For the Spring Creek, there we go. Spring Creek Campground and for the 4th of July beach area, that I'd like to write in there that we maintain access to the beaches for public access. Because I don't believe it's in the Spring Creek one, it might be in the 4th of July one, but I think that's worth having in there, that the wording says there will be a maintained public access to the beach.
Even though it's a campground, then people might just sort of block it
Yeah.
off, you think, so that it gives notice to people to keep it open for
Correct.
anybody who wants to come through?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think, campground's great out there, but also I don't want to just fill it up so nobody can get to the beach to walk their dog or just spend time on the area.
and that would be like, with that, would you want to make sure that we have like designated, I think it's more of an issue with the Spring Creek Campground than it is 4th of July.
Yeah.
But like having designated public property, like public parking, sorry, designated public parking.
Yeah.
Probably signage to say this is beach access, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. So it doesn't just all fill up with RVs and then nobody can
You
go
get to it.
spend time on the beach? Yeah, an RV area and then a parking area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you put a parking area and say beach access, that kind of makes sure that you can walk down.
Yeah, Carol?
I'm glad we're touching on this on the map on page 96. This parcel now has a fence going pretty much across from Jellison, goes straight across. So the campground is actually only the northern part of this dotted line parcel. So that needs to be corrected. We're never going to have access to that fenced-in area for a campground. It's a much smaller campground than shown on the map.
Has JAG taken over that part or something?
Oh,
No, it services the breakwater, they
Yeah.
store stuff there.
And they, because when they updated, as part of the plan right there, and I think the updated imagery will be very helpful in this, but with the breakwater in there, and then with, they actually did a lot of upgrading on that dock that goes out there, and they have a crane that can be installed on there now, and so there's much more like utilities for the water side. And so I think for security purposes, they did put a fence on that side because they are now using like harbor equipment over there, and a lot of the boats use that, I don't know, it's like a 30-ton crane or something like that that's
Yeah.
installed there. And so, so that's where we can see that water access, that's going along the south side of that portion.
So that fenced-in area, is it fenced in for the city, by the city area, or is it leased out to?
It's public, it's like a harbor resource, it's
Okay.
not leased out to anybody, but they do have it fenced, so that way, like, you don't have the campers.
Yeah.
Campers, basically, it's there so that you don't have campers coming in
To the-
and hanging out like in that area, because it is a
work area?
designated harbor work area.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's our equipment there.
Yeah, and people can use our crane, I think they have to pay to use it, but they can use that crane
Yeah.
that's installed there.
Okay. So the city put the fence up?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's a harbor fencing
Okay.
to keep the campground on one side and the,
Yeah.
Makes it,
yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
makes sense, yeah.
Carol's question.
Oh, Carol, sorry.
Just to continue, I'd like to see this parcel replatted and this rezoned as park. Because I think we really need a campground over there. It's a very popular campground, especially in the salmon area. It's the only city campground on that side of the bay, and that need will only grow. And so instead of zoning this industrial, I'd like to preserve it as a public
Campground?
campground, public as a park, and then just like Forest Acres campground or waterfront, zoned park is used as a campground.
Sure, you want to protect it because right now it's industrial and people are just simply
Exactly,
using.
it's zoned industrial. And then, beach access to me is really important to a lot of people, and this map needs to be extended up, and that goes on to another section, which I wrote down somewhere, where it talks about the tidelands. So we need to consider this as a unit. This is Spring Creek Park and Spring Creek Beach. So it needs to ensure that the public can have access to that public tidelands that goes up. And there's a section that everybody uses, but it's private property, that beach tidelands. And we need to put that on our acquisition list to get an easement through there from the private property owners, so that when anyone goes out to enjoy the beach, they are not trespassing. And it's happened to many of our favorite places where we can no longer go there. And this plan is a way to ensure that we will be able to go there. But we have to plan for it.
Seems like we just have to delineate those areas specifically and protect the areas for the access to the tidelands in particular.
Right. And if we do own a lot of tidelands there, but there's that section that belongs to the adjacent property owner that we need to negotiate an easement. And it's just beach, it just looks the same as the city beach, but it's not.
It's just theirs.
Yeah, I agree. If we're gonna maintain that area for RV camping in the future, then we definitely need to divide it off and rezone it for RVs instead of just kind of making it this haphazard, default campground.
I think it cleaning it up and just, making sure that people know where it is, because, we may see it on a map, but people driving out there are not gonna know. So if we're able to do, to me, signage is a big thing that sort of tells people.
There is a sign, Spring Creek campground.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about, protecting the beach access and the rest of those things as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to get access to that spot so people aren't trespassing, because they fish for silvers all the way down to the old sawmill terminal down there. Accessing it from this parking lot right here when they're running. Or excuse me, reds are in there. Sorry, not silvers. When the reds are running, they're over there.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful spot. And once it was rezoned and replatted as a park, then improvements could be made. There could be just,
Yeah.
people love to camp next to alders, anything green. And it could be re-landscaped, so it's not just a gravel parking lot, because right now it's just an industrial zone.
Yeah.
If it was a park, we could work towards making it a really attractive park. And it has an anadromous stream, Spring Creek stream, running right through it. It's beautiful marshland, it's on someone else's property, but you can look at it. It's really a beautiful little spot. And we should protect it.
Yeah.
I'll bring you some of my alders for that property.
Yeah.
Yeah, wall.
And then that kind of leads me to 4th of July beach. And this is another beach that everyone just takes for granted. We just assume, that we'll have access to it. The city owns part of what we think is 4th of July beach, and then the state, general DNR land, owns most of the rest of it. But when we're looking at our tidelands, if I can find this on my list here. On page 183, 184, I think, where we need to go. I had a vision for a completely different replatting. So on page 183 is the map. And it shows this huge parcel that's part of Spring Creek Campground and all the way down to including where 4th of July Beach is. It's huge. And what I'd like to do is, if we could replat Spring Creek Campground, and then all of this Highlands would be part of that plat, and then that hooks up to part of the north to some more city-owned Highlands. So I'll just make that one complete discrete parcel. And then down here, 4th of July Beach, a little bit of this city Tidelands hooks into 4th of July Beach. So carve that portion off, including the Tidelands, just like extend that line straight across. It's really not usable, it's erosional. I'd like to have the US Coast Guard tower to a safer place. It's an emergency beacon. And if the tsunami comes, what's going to be the first thing to go out? It's this thing on this crumbling. It's really an unstable location. And so we should encourage them maybe to relocate on another tower, maybe the one GCI has on top of the hill, because it shouldn't be in a tsunami runout zone. So anyway, replat that and then hook that parcel into the rest of the city. City-owned parcel, and it's all scattered, unfortunately, because it's just been treated that way for a long time. Let's see if I can find it. So it's pretty close, page 179. And I wish we had those giant maps of the east side of the bay, because it would be really easy to stand up and show you. So here we have parcel 14534049, and that kind of hooks onto the parcel I was just talking about, that bigger parcel. So rezone that as park, and then that will secure access to the park. It's what everyone thinks of as park, but it's own industrial, and we could lose it really quickly.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is find one solid map. It's hard to track with what you got there.
It's so hard.
Do we have any of those
Yeah.
for the other side of the bay that we can look at? You know,
Yeah, we actually.
We don't have to have it here
We're
now.
actually working on maps, but the thing that, we
because
got
I'm
our.
having a hard time wrapping my brain around
We,
some of the stuff she's
I
referring to.
know.
We moved our $40,000 printer across the road this last week. We had to have it professionally moved. And we're waiting for like new heads and ink. So it will be a little while, but we will have very nice maps in here at some point in time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When you look at this area, just think of it as we want to protect 4th of July Beach as a park, and make contiguous areas that make sense.
Oh, we went to
Make that
campus.
part of it too.
Yep.
And then this huge parcel here that is up for, it's on their lease section.
Is that 1453405A?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's huge. That should be replatted with this section. You know, if you've been out there, you see where JAG is parking. They have like 37 vehicles and trucks and trailers. And they have a lot of stuff parking on city property that they're not leasing.
Oh.
And it's not, this is Sorrel Road, this little cul-de-sac here, that's Sorrel Road.
I
But
don't even know it.
parking in the right-of-way is different from parking in unleased city property. So it's obvious to me they need a pretty good chunk of space here, and that should be subdivided with their parking needs in mind, but also with parking needs for 4th of July beach users, because they're hogging the whole thing. And if this little parking lot that the city maintains right here, which is wonderful, the city maintains that, and they try to improve it for drainage and stuff, but sometimes, you know, you don't want to go down in there, it's down. And it can be really deep with slush, and I've seen people trying to dig out of there.
Stuff.
So you just don't want to risk it and go down. So we need to have an upland space designated for 4th of July beach parking. And that is what I believe is planning for the future. So as we consider the needs of JAG, they need a parking lot, so do beach users, and then there's no conflicts with us parking, and they park right where beach users want to park.
I think we'll also have an issue, maybe not an issue, but we'll have to consider the Coast Guard when they're over there, when they,
I don't think they'll be right in this area though.
no,
They'll-
but over there back
they'll
further.
be over here.
Yeah, a little back further,
Right.
but still
but
designated,
still,
same concept,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's planning, that's what planning's about.
Yeah.
And 4th of July beach is not gonna get less popular, it's just a phenomenal beach. And we need to protect it
Absolutely.
as an asset.
Yeah, I agree with Carol. This lot 4049, it's, a portion of it looks like it's up kind of where Jag should be using it. There's that little finger, but the majority of it is down on the beach where, or in the trees right above the beach where you wouldn't really ever use it for industrial or residential. It's not particularly useful except for park. Could we, it seems like a bigger issue than to talk about it tonight, but could we maybe schedule something to talk about just this area? Because I agree with the parking and the Spring Creek needs adjustment, maybe just this area to look at drawing some new lines and some new zoning for these, because this, especially 4049, it doesn't make sense, and it should be park, but not all of it, because that little tiny finger should be probably part of Jag, because it kind of is in their area, and they might already be using it. I don't know, and they do need a parking lot. I think it's a wise decision to make a whole night of kind of messing
That
with
whole
this.
back area, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spring Creek to 4th of July.
Okay.
And Carol will come to that, right?
I would love to. I value that land so much, and I just would hate to see it lost.
Yeah, parks would be nice over there. So, and then I have another one
Yeah.
real quick. 117,
Page?
page 117, yes. Let's see, let me get there. So I saw, it says Seward, small boat harbor, and small is crossed off in blue, but then the next page, we have Seward, small boat harbor in black. So,
Which is typo? Or,
Yeah, we just need to get that, we just need to clean that up a little bit.
yeah, that one needs to be
Yeah.
kept. And then on,
Can I make a comment on that?
yeah,
The plat is actually Seward Small Boat Harbor, the legal description, so you can't change that.
oh, so it has to be,
That's the legal name of the plat. But when you're talking about the Seward Boat Harbor, we deleted that name a few years ago because it's really not Seward Boat.
It is a deceiving, like, it's a
Yeah.
deceiving term.
It
But
is.
I just see on this one, it says Seward Small Boat Harbor crossed out, and then the next page, it says Seward Small Boat Harbor.
Right.
So,
I'm not sure exactly where that is, but I noticed in the legal descriptions, it does say Seward Small Boat Harbor.
okay,
So if it's a legal description, we're just stuck with that, because it's
yeah,
legal
but we
name.
need to keep it a small boat harbor,
You have to keep
Yeah.
Seward Small Boat Harbor.
but it has a cross through it, so,
That's not true, that's not correct.
I know, I'm
So-
saying it shouldn't be crossed through, it should be kept as small boat harbor.
Because we do have a few of those, like the Alaska Starfish Company, same thing. Seward Small Boat Harbor in the legal description.
Yeah.
A lot of those.
Is
So
mine
if it's a
different?
legal
Like, it looks like
description-
they're taking it out.
You can't change that.
Yeah, they are,
Well,
they are taking it out here. Yeah.
We'll housekeep that one.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all I mean, like,
Yeah.
Right,
it's different from the others.
and it's been years to try to
Never thought you were Mr. Consistency.
correct that.
I am, I like things consistent.
You and me both.
I also, I don't know if, on 135, it says for the shipyard here, it says to retain ownership or sell. I don't know what everybody else's feelings are, but I don't really want to sell it. I think we should just retain ownership of it. I mean, you know, if
Which one are you looking at?
it's page 135, and it's talking about they're crossing off Seward's shipyard and replacing it with JAG L95-094. And under retention status, it says retain ownership or sell. I'd like to retain ownership of that. I think it's a valuable piece of property for the city, and leasing it makes sense, but also if something happens and they leave or we don't have a dry dock, it can be used, the city could use it for all kinds of other things. I think it's a really important spot. I don't want to get rid of it and then have them or somebody later on when their lease is up decide, well, we don't really want a dry dock, let's develop it. You know, I feel like we would miss out on something if we sold that lot.
That's a critical piece of terrain there for people,
Yeah.
particularly. And then you never know, if they sold it to, say, JAG or whoever at the time, and they bring somebody else in, as you sort of inferred, you might lose the complete access to that whole area, which is a great resource for the community.
Yeah. I think it's very valuable for the city, and I don't want to see it sold.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's all I have to say.
Anybody else? Oh, Carol.
That really ties in with one of your original statements, that the city should not sell land, it should lease it instead. So, looking at our general policy recommendations, maybe that could be incorporated into that as well, because it does talk about lease terms, but it doesn't have that statement that we should, where possible, lease land and not sell it. Just whatever you said right at the beginning was perfect.
Yeah, I think there's just, we need to differentiate what lands are, we keep in perpetuity and what makes lease and then others
Right.
to sell, yeah.
And then incorporate, wherever it's, you can do a word check, wherever it says sell in here, if it's not one of those 5 parcels that we would be interested in selling, then we need to reevaluate, because there's lots of cells in here, but that wouldn't be in conformance with our policy. Keep our city lands, get value from them as leased lands, and retain ownership. So that's another thing to go through, and where we just say sell, like, no, we lease it,
Yeah, I agree. I've said it before, but I think that I'm opposed to pretty much selling land except for the extreme cases and, well, unique cases, and for residential development, because that benefits the people, but the rest of the land is essentially everybody's in the town, and it makes sense to keep them making money every year instead of selling it off for the quick buck. And it's all of everybody's land.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to make sure as we're looking at this, and it says in the statement, it's at the beginning somewhere, but we need to really be thinking about considerations for the future in regards to, we do need a new city hall. This thing was built not long after the earthquake. We love our closet, but no, but I do think that we do need a new fire department. Like that thing has to be like after the public works site comes up, it's that. We need that. Our police department we need a different facility for the police department. The amount of maintenance they have to put in the jail downstairs is uncanny to just keep that thing going. And so there's definitely the need for a public safety building or expanded multi-use facility or something like that. But yeah, and every time we even touch this building, it's asbestos abatement. And so there's, at some point in time, because I think this building was built in the late 60s, I believe. But just to be future planning too, when we look at city lands and, or even looking at possible land swaps, or if there's other entities that have land or that type of thing, but that we can, making sure because we do need some new city buildings. I think, having a good fire department is very important.
Yes.
Being able to store your equipment, kind of like the public works thing. If you don't have a big enough structure or an adequate structure, it costs you a lot in many ways. So just to be thinking about, setting aside spots for those.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd love to see a section in this plan for our needs to keep in mind. And then when we
Short-term and
get-
long-term.
Yeah, be sure to put the public works facility on there so we can cross it off.
Just because it feels good to cross it off, right?
Most definitely.
And I agree that we need to build a new city hall and police department, and yeah, we need to upgrade.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a couple of comments.
Yeah, great.
Just on, if we go to page 20, looking at the, city shop and animal shelter, I just wanted to say, like, should we put in something for the alley that will presumably result from that? Because it's currently just ends, the alley just ends there. It doesn't actually go through that property, there's like a fence. I actually see the utilities stop there, so I was wondering if there's plans for that to go through there.
I'm assuming that when they move everything and replat it, we'd plat in the alley and put the utilities down and connect them.
Okay. So yeah, maybe make a note about that, I don't know.
Is that on, what page is that on?
This is page 20, I'm looking at the map. The map's on page 20.
So page 22.
22 if you're using your PDF thing.
Okay. All right.
Selena, do you know if that's public right-of-way still?
It is, I believe the plan is to run utilities down that and continue that as like public right of way.
So the city, it's still public right-of-way all the way through?
Right now it's not, but that would be platted for, I mean, who knows, like our platting is very, because the city, when the city owned a piece of property, there may have been a right of way through there, or there may have been a utility in there, but they never, a lot of times they didn't create easements.
The borough shows that it's a right-of-way.
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's
Yeah,
what I was wondering.
yeah, so it does, those are divided into two parcels with that right of way in the middle. But it's hard to, it's good to make sure that we ensure that those are
Yeah, correct.
there.
So wouldn't that be a good thing to note? I think, Brennan, that's an excellent observation to note in this
Page 20.
description that the alley should continue.
And then I just had one other question about page 83, I guess that's going to be page 85 in the PDF, or, let's see. Boy, I wrote in the wrong number, I guess.
What was the?
Well, the question was, there was a mention of Dairy Hill Lane and not being, oh, it's page, it is page 83 on the PDF and page 85. It says Dairy Hill Lane has never been a right-of-way, or never been dedicated as a public right-of-way. I just, like, so that road's not a public road? I'm just trying to understand what that means.
So is everyone. It's bizarre.
What page are you on?
That's page 83 on the PDF, or sorry, 85 on the PDF, or 83 on, I don't know what to tell you, about these pages.
The Benny Benson Memorial Park
Yes,
is in there,
That's page 83.
under where duck area is crossed out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gazebo located in the southwest corner of the lagoon was donated.
Oh, the road into Benny Benson Memorial Park, is that what it's referring to?
I don't, is that whole road? I don't know. That was my question. That was just, seemed strange to me, but,
You could actually delete that, I would think, if there's, because it's just talking about the park itself, people just drive in there.
Yeah, I think they are referring to like that little pull out into Benny Benson, but that's never been dedicated as a right-of-way. Because on the borough's map, it just shows the plat for the lagoon.
Lagoon.
Like, the lagoon is one big plat, and, but yeah, it doesn't,
Yeah, can we delete it? Does it even need to be
I think
designated?
it's the road.
It's just a parking lot.
It's the road. The road goes like this, and then it pinches
Comes
off.
in, yeah.
And then it comes up again and goes on. So that would be an action item to dedicate a legal right-of-way for Dairy Hill Lane.
Okay.
It's a really bizarre road.
So it's not just the pull-off into the memorial, it's actually the little section of road between the highway and the pull-off.
Dairy Hill Lane.
Yeah, the turn.
Right.
Oh, that is strange.
There's a few of those in this town.
Yeah, but this plan, is a good one to have an action item so it doesn't get lost. That's been kind of lost. People just use it as if it's a real road. And it's bizarre.
And speaking of, there's one that we are gonna have to address probably sooner than later, and I don't know which page it's on, but, I think we were just on it a minute ago, but, so if you're coming up Coolidge and you're turning into the ball fields,
Enter
you're actually
road?
you're actually entering private property. So that angle that you come in there, it's the old Dick Raff.
Dick Raff, yeah,
Dave's
Dave's place.
Dave's place.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna have to talk to that owner and get permission to cross his property or get a right of way there. But then actually what we're entering after that is actually borough property, and there's not a dedicated right of way to actually access the ball fields there. And it's just a borough parcel. That includes like Citizens Fields, the school, and all that kind of stuff, but it's one of those things where the plating and all that stuff came after the history, I think, but what's gonna happen is if the utility is sold, what they're considering the primary access to, because there's access from that side with utility to that park area, we're kind of like, okay, because we can access that property, but if the utility is sold, then all of a sudden, like, I don't know if they would approve the plat for that utility if it's replatted, because it would basically landlock the city ball field, because there's no access to it, because the borough does not have a right of way there, and we have to cross private property. And so that's another cleanup that we're probably gonna have to address. We probably need to address, it came up when we went to replat the animal shelter. And so we had to actually like only replat the animal shelter instead of putting the ball field as its own property and the utility building as its own property. And so whatever happens with the utility, we probably need to do that sooner than later than anyway. So that's something that we'll bring up to you guys, and we'll put it on the list so we can cross it off.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, have a good map, because I wasn't tracking with that at all. I know where Coolidge is, and I know that road really well. I do every day,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to figure out the right of way.
Yeah, so what's weird is that, well, what it is the whole road is actually not, it's just borough property. It's not an actual like dedicated road or easement or anything. But when you turn on, it's really funny. If you look on the parcel viewer, and I can send you the link, you're like, oh yeah, we're definitely like just crossing private property right there. So.
Okay.
It's a weird corner.
Okay. Oh heavens,
Yeah.
It's a funky little shape.
you're not kidding.
Yeah, so that's probably gonna be coming sooner than later as far as cleaning stuff up.
Well, especially with the sale of the utility, we need to clean that up.
Yeah, exactly, because they're gonna want to get a hold of that. So that's something that we will probably do here in the near future. I'll bring before you or talk to the property owner and get that taken care of.
Carol?
On page copy 188, general policy recommendations. The first one is really interesting. It says require dedication of land during subdivision replatting to widen substandard rights of ways. And just recently we approved a 50-foot right of way in the subdivision. So I would like to suggest that we change the code to not allow substandard roads, to require the 60-foot right of way. And then we won't be trying to go back all the time to claw back that additional 10 feet. Just don't allow 50 foot in the first place. The borough doesn't allow it, we shouldn't either.
Yeah, I like that standardization. So
We
we
are-
don't have to go back and fix mistakes later.
We are in the process of looking at Title 16 and
Right.
and
That'd be fun.
and updating our subdivision agreements and making sure that's aligned. So we are in that
It
process.
also says that the road has to be gravel.
I know with that's we're like getting rid of that right away.
Why?
We
Yeah.
used to be able to make roads without gravel apparently.
Just dirt.
So your horse and carriage.
And then on H of that same list, it says develop a conservation overlay district to protect critical natural lands. And I'd like to see a definition of what is a conservation overlay. I'm all for it, sounds awesome. But I've also seen it in this plan to protect the flood zone. So critical natural lands, flood zones, wildlife habitat, salmon streams, and other critical natural lands. So I'd like to see that better defined, added to the code, so it's part of our code, and have a map that shows where all these critical overlay zones are.
Is there a definition, like a national definition for something like that, or a state definition of a conservation overlay?
I haven't researched it, but it sounds like there would be.
Which I would think.
There's gotta be something similar enough that we can just piggyback
Right,
off of it.
right,
And then we don't have to come up with our own terminology.
Right.
Similarity is
Take
good.
somebody else.
right. And then what are the restrictions if something does have a conservation overlay? You have to really think the whole thing out. But I've seen it in the plan a few times, and it's like, well,
I don't know what it
what does
is.
that really mean? You know, what would be the impact of that? If I could, surplus lands, it said there weren't any. If I don't remember what page that was on.
That's at the beginning,
On
wasn't
page
it?
185. Is it?
Vacant lots, or is it 187?
And it's
185 on
Yeah,
the
it's 185
actual
at the top.
Okay, so surplus lands, it said none, but the lot on Bull Canyon Road is a that's the only one I can think of that's surplus. Keeping in mind, I think our general policy is to keep city land until all our city needs are met, right? But occasionally you have surplus land, and I think this one is a really good candidate for surplus. It'd be really good for housing.
Yeah,
Zone you are.
yeah, we've
So
got,
is it 204? I didn't write it down, but
It's,
it's just
yeah.
uphill from Glacier View Apartments.
Yeah.
It's zoned in institutional right now, but it,
Zone you are,
I thought, oh, you are, excuse me, but it's up against an R1 on one side.
probably.
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like you just zone it R1 and put a house on it.
Right. Yeah,
Right
decide
at the
what
base
zone
of
it is.
the.
The lots across the street.
Right here.
Yeah.
Are zone you are.
Yeah.
They have
And actually,
a
it's on the blue.
townhouse there.
Yeah, the neighbors are kind of using it as a storage lot.
Yeah.
What page is it on?
I don't know what page is on, I was just looking at it.
Yeah, I'm looking
Oh,
at the
you're on
parcel
parcel viewer.
viewer.
Yeah.
And it does look like it's UR.
It is, yeah, sorry, I was thinking of a different.
Oh, no.
It's actually the part of the cul-de-sac that was the original Lowell Canyon Road that actually used to go up and then bend, and that was the end of the road. There was a cul-de-sac. There was a cul-de-sac there. Yeah.
It's a huge little cut.
Well, yeah, it was just, because, Kevin Finch is there, but that was before the apartment went in, so we were looking at some, there's actually vacated water lines and sewer lines underneath there that we were kind of doing some research on at one point.
So if that cul-de-sac was vacated, half would go to each adjacent property owner?
Yes.
Something.
Yep, we definitely had discussions about that, because there's been some people that have approached us about that property.
The recommendation is to sell that
Sell that.
lot.
Yeah.
Can we put in there recommendation to rezone to R1 and sell?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
That's what it says actually.
But it's safe?
That's what we did last time.
Just want to make sure.
Because I don't think there's enough room to
Yeah,
put
I
anything
think
else
so.
on that piece of land, really.
No.
It's pretty small.
Yeah, you wouldn't use it for UR, and it's behind the
Glacier
complex,
View.
so they wouldn't take it because add-on because it's in a weird spot.
I think the individual who lives right by there wants that piece of land too.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Anybody have anything else to offer? Any considerations?
Our bin finally started working
2 hours later.
Had to warm up.
just now.
I had just one thing that I saw, one last thing is
Sure.
the Derby booth. We had talked about that at one point in time, that I think that's page, I think it's 113.
Yep. So your recommendation was to basically charge them for every month if they're not using it, correct?
Right, initially, yeah, and you've changed it to, and maybe they are using it now, more so than they had before, because somebody had said that they had actually had used a little bit more,
Yeah,
because,
they use it as a visitor center all summer long. They had a staffer that was down there.
if they do, yeah, because I know there's been, somebody can't be in there all the time, but I just, I said, it looked like it was a storage shed most of the time, and I was just like, well, I just want to be sure that it's being used effectively.
Yep.
And if it's not being used, then lease it out to somebody who can, pay for it, because right now the chamber's not paying for it at all.
Right, correct.
I'd sure like to see all the chamber, I think the chamber building site was listed as a contribution to the chamber. And this is on top of our giving them, what, $250,000 a year budget? I don't know what that figure is, but we're already very generously providing them with bed tax money and then additional grant money and stuff. So I just like them as a private business. I'd like them to pay rent for the derby booth and for their chamber building.
Yeah.
If we're giving them money and free rent,
Are,
they shouldn't
yeah.
get both.
Right?
But I don't think that's our decision. That's the council one, is it, for money?
Yeah, I don't know what bed tax was last year anyway, I just, because they got a few employees too, they have to worry about paying for it too, but do you recall what the bed tax was last year at all?
The last,
Because they get 50% of the bed tax, don't they?
yeah, and so they got the number, because they get it 2 years in arrears. And so the number they got this year was very, very low. Very low, because this was the 2020 hit.
Pandemic.
The pandemic hit. And so it was significantly low. So when I was there, I actually was hoarding money because we had to fill the hole for this
Right.
year. And so, but I think the last good year that we had, I think it was like 290, like half the bed tax. So it's 4%, 2% goes to the city that's supposed to be for infrastructure, and then half went to the chamber. And so I think that was 290.
And the 1%, I forget, they used to go to the hospital at one time, I forget the 1% was what that went for.
Yeah, there's a 1% that goes to the hospital.
Yeah. So, and it's, I just think it's, it's a good recommendation, Carol. I mean, it's, if the bed tax continues to go up and things like this, and with our lodging industry being so successful, that, we'll have to, take a look at it again, but that is a council decision.
And I know that there's been talk at the council level of at least creating a predictable kind of cap, where you create an amount, and then obviously you might want to look at increasing it by a few percentage each year, just for cost of living adjustment or
COLA,
inflation,
yeah.
that type of thing. But I know that has been informally discussed, or at least I believe it might have even been brought up at a council meeting at some point.
It has.
Okay. Yeah, I believe so.
Well, we could just recommend that the council recommend that the chamber the areas that the chamber is gifted, that the council look at potentially changing that.
Yeah, it seems like they're double dipping.
But do you think it's kind of weird we pay them, but then they gotta pay us back for some of it? We already give them that budget, so.
Well, it's like the rest of the city.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems like a council issue. We just
Yeah.
tell them
Yeah.
to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Or if we're giving them a set budget, then stop the percentage after that to cap on top of it. If we're giving them $250,000 budget or whatever, why do we gotta give the 2% on top of that? Can we not put that elsewhere in the?
No, the 250 is that
That's
percent.
from the
That's
2%.
2%.
Yeah, that is the 2%.
Okay.
Yeah. But we should just recommend that the council can figure out the money.
Yeah.
It's not really our area.
Yeah, let them
Yeah, we look at the lease stuff.
see where else
Yeah.
they can do it.
I know it's a sensitive subject because the chamber does, it's got a great opportunity for, bringing people into town, and it does help an awful lot for a lot of the businesses as well as, just the visitor industry in general. But I think, the perception might be is, they're getting the free building, they're getting the free derby, and they're getting money. And so maybe just having a discussion what's reasonable, for folks. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Let's see. Well, I think that was a successful meeting. I think we made a good dent on it. Do we know how we're gonna, add all the additions and changes and stuff like this, and we'll launch that out? This is not gonna be a time, we'll bring it to a meeting do you think we're, have maybe one more work session to look at it to make sure we're all in agreement of what the changes are and then bring it forward? If everybody is pretty well good with that. I don't think it's council ready by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do more revisions, and then we'll make sure it's just really tidied up, and then give you a chance to look at it one more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that's it. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.